Hello world! Welcome to our first crossover partnership video with the up-and-coming CTF Guide platform, which just launched at the time this video went live. We are excited to announce that this is officially our first partnership with another platform, and we look forward to working with CTF Guide to produce peak content for the cybersecurity and overall technology community. To celebrate the launch of CTF Guide, this video will cover a beginner's guide to the CyberChef utility. So why don't we go ahead and get into the meat of the video. For those of you who don't know, CyberChef is a tool that allows someone to create recipes for performing different operations on data. These recipes are essentially just a series of steps that are sequentially executed top to bottom to perform said operations on pieces of data. The basic logic flow of the software is that some data is entered into the input window, one or more operations are dragged into the recipe window, and then the result of the operation is displayed in the output window. Now that we have a high-level overview of how the tool functions, let's go over some of the features that the tool offers. Let's start from the very top. Currently, I am accessing the tool from the GitHub site available on the web. There's a download link in the upper left-hand corner of the interface in case you want to get the tool on your local host. All you have to do is click the link, extract the zip file, and open the CyberChef HTML file in the web browser of your choosing. When you open the local version of the tool, you'll notice that instead of the download link in the upper left-hand corner, the version number is there in its place. You can also see how long ago the last build of CyberChef was in the top middle of the interface. In this case, the last build occurred 3 months ago. In the top right-hand corner, there's an options button, which can allow you to adjust the interface's settings, such as switching between themes like classic and dark mode. There's also the About Support button, which gives you some general information about the tool like version and copyright info, as well as allow you to do things like report bugs that you encounter while using CyberChef. Moving down the interface, we see that there are 4 windows that we can interact with. The input window, which is where the user inputs the data they want to operate on. The operations window, which is where we can look for different functions to perform on the data that's entered into the input window. The recipe window, which is where we drag and stack different functions from the operations window. And finally, the output window, which shows the results of whatever recipe is launched or baked against the data inside the input window. Let's start with the features that are available in the input window. In the input window, we have a length and a line counter. These effectively keep track of how many bytes of data are entered into the input window and how many lines of data that there are, respectively. If I were to type a couple of strings separated by a new line by pressing the Enter key, we can see that the length of the input is 21 and the number of lines is 2. Also, when I click inside the input or highlight a section of the input, CyberChef keeps track of what index or indices I start and end at. We can also add a new tab to the input window by pressing this plus button right here, where we can put another piece of data in to apply recipes to. And that tab will be separate from the other tab that we have data in. And you can add as many of these tabs as you want. If you have something in your input window and you want to get rid of it, you can always delete it by using this trash can, and that will clear the whole window. You can also play around with the sizes of the different windows and always reset them back to their default sizes using this button here. So let's go ahead and play with some of the sizes here. As you can see, I can shrink that, and to reset it, we'll just click this, and there you go. Now let's move on to the operations window. The operations window contains a listing of different operation categories that you can click on and view the different operations that fall under each one. As you may be aware, CyberChef can do a lot more than just perform simple functions on data. It can also manipulate data in different ways. For example, let's say I want to perform a reverse operation on my input. We can search for different operations with the search bar feature. For our purposes, I will be looking for the reverse keyword. As you can see, as I type in the search word, the operations listings dynamically update to match the keyword as I type it in character by character. Rev is enough of a substring to have the function we're looking for appear as the top search result. So now we can drag it into our recipe window. Now let's assume I may need to use this function multiple times for my recipe, and I don't want to have to search for it every time I need to use it again. I can add the reverse function to my favorites by dragging the function, be it from the operations window or the recipe window, to the favorites operation category. So all we need to do is back out of that and just drag this into here. And if we expand our favorites, you can see the reverse operation down here. And with that, we now readily have access to our reverse operation without going through the hassle of searching for it or manually looking for it every time. Let's move on to the recipe window. As you saw, we are able to drag and drop operations into this window, and we can drop as many as we want to. The sky's the limit. Let's add a couple more operations to our recipe. We'll add the sorting and 2 uppercase operations, and these can be found in the utils category here. If you don't know what to look for, add the sort and 2 uppercase. Let's say we want to create a new recipe, but we want to be able to reload our current recipe in case we need to use it again. We can save our recipe via the Save Recipe button. There's a few different formats we can choose from: Chef, Clean JSON, and Compact JSON. Well, we'll just go with the Chef format. We can give the recipe a name, and we can choose whether we want to include the recipe, the input data, or both when we save the recipe. So we'll just leave both of those checked. We are also given a unique GitHub link to our recipe in case we want to share it with other people. And when I try opening the link in a new tab, we can see that it is the exact same recipe and input that we had in the previous tab. Let's give the recipe a name of test and go ahead and save it. Now let's clear our recipe with the trash icon. And now let's try reloading our test recipe with the folder icon. And then we'll just click load here. We can see that the recipe fully appears just as we had saved it before. In regards to actually baking our recipe, we have a few options when it comes to that. We have the bake button, which allows us to manually bake our full recipe when we want. And as you can see, our result appears in the output window. Then we have the step button, which allows us to walk through the recipe step by step, and each step is showcased in the output window. So as you can see, sort sorts it, and then if we step to uppercase, then it uppercases it. Finally, we have the auto bake feature, which automatically bakes our recipe each time we add or remove an operation to or from it. In the operations themselves, we can also disable certain operations we don't want to use anymore, as well as set breakpoints to stop at the middle of execution. If I disable the reverse operation and then bake, we can see that our input is never reversed, as demonstrated by our output. If I set a breakpoint at the sort operation, it's also good to note that you can disable multiple operations and set multiple breakpoints in the recipe.
Our recipe execution will
It's not limited to just one. You can also set both the breakpoint and the disable operation simultaneously. Lastly, let's take a look at the output window. Whatever our output is, we can save it to our local host via the save button right here. The default file name is download.dat, but you can change it to whatever file name and extension that you want. We can also copy the output with this button to our clipboard for pasting somewhere else. Let me try copying and pasting into a Notepad document. As you can see, it completely copied our output that we had in the output window into our Notepad document. Now say you want to make the output your new input. You can do that with this button here. As you can see, our old input has been replaced with our current output. So let's say you didn't mean to do that. You can hit the undo button here to retract your previous action. Now our input is back to the way it was originally. Finally, we can also maximize our output window for a fuller view, and then restore it when we want to revert it back to our original layout. Now that we have a general understanding of most of the features and some basic data manipulation that's in CyberChef, let's go over some basic encryption and decryption functionalities. Let's start off with some basic decryption. Let's take a simple string that's been encrypted with base64. There are a couple ways we can go about decrypting this string. We can first try to just decrypt it via the corresponding operation, assuming that we know what algorithm was used to encrypt the string, and in this case we do. Luckily, the from base64 operation is in our favorites by default, so we can just go ahead and drag it into our recipe. I'm going to check auto bake, and we'll have to click bake for the first time, but this will allow us to automatically apply our recipe to our input. That way we don't have to always click the bake button all the time. As we can see, the output contains our decrypted plaintext string, which appears to be auspiciously in the flag format for CTF Guide's CTF practice challenges. But what if we didn't know that the encryption algorithm was base64? While I would normally use a third-party tool for this, you can try using the magic operation. The magic operation will analyze the input for various patterns and properties in an attempt to detect which operations may have been used to encrypt the input. Let's replace the from base64 operation with the magic operation in our recipe. As suspected, magic was easily able to identify which encryption algorithm was used, and also provides us with the decrypted plaintext, along with some other miscellaneous properties. But what if our ciphertext is multi-layer encrypted with multiple different algorithms? We can still use the same methods that we used for the basic decryption example, except we may need to add more operations to the recipe in order to decrypt the ciphertext. Let's use a multi-layer encrypted string for our example this time. We know from our previous example that this is base64, so we can go ahead and add that operation. We see that the output shows us a hexadecimal encoded string rather than the plain text, so we'll need to add the from hex operation as well. And with that, we get the decrypted plaintext string. Now we can also use magic for this example too, but be careful because if it can't identify one of the layers of encryption in the ciphertext, it will cease attempting to decrypt at the unidentifiable layer. That's not an issue for this example though, so let's see how magic works with multi-layer encryption. If we scroll down the table, we can see how magic gradually builds the recipe for decrypting the ciphertext, as well as the plaintext that it eventually arrives at, just like in the basic decryption example previously. This is probably pretty obvious, but I will go over it anyways just in case. You can stack multiples of the same operation in a recipe. So, let's take a string that's been encrypted with base64 over and over again for an unknown number of times. We can drag and drop the from base64 operation as many times as necessary to decrypt our ciphertext. To cover all our bases, we should be able to use the magic operation once again to kind of automate this process for us as well. If magic plays nice with us, it will save us some time as we won't have to drag multiple operations out into the recipe window. Now notice how magic doesn't fully finish decrypting the string as we scroll down and see the results here. That's because our depth is set to 3. In other words, magic is limited to only being able to go 3 encryption layers deep. So if a string is encrypted more than 3 times, which in our case it was, magic won't be able to reach the end. To alleviate this, we can just increase the depth value to a higher number. And if we scroll down a little bit further, sure enough, changing the depth from 3 to 4 gives us the extra layer of decryption we needed to derive the plaintext from the magic operation. Encryption in CipherChef works the same way as decryption, but instead of trying to expose the plaintext from a ciphertext, we are trying to obfuscate the plaintext to form a ciphertext. Let's start off with the plaintext CTF flag. To encrypt the string, all we're going to do is drag the to base64 operation to the recipe. The output window shows our base64 encoded string, and that's all there is to basic encryption in CipherChef. Just like with decryption, we can stack multiple different operations in the recipe to provide multi-layer encryption to our plaintext string. Let's grab ourselves a new plaintext string. Now let's add the to hex operation before we add the to base64 operation. We can see our hex coding in the output, so now we can just add the to base64 operation. And there we have our plaintext encoded in a multi-layer encrypted ciphertext. Again, just like with decryption, we can stack multiples of the same operations in the recipe. Let's grab ourselves a new plaintext. Let's throw a few base64 operations into the recipe. And as we do that, we can see that our ciphertext gets longer and longer. That's because when you multi-layer encrypt a string with the same algorithm, each ciphertext iteration in turn will be longer than the previous. This is just like how when we did the decryption counterpart, the ciphertext got shorter as we kept stacking each from base64 decryption operation. Now let's circle back to the two input window features we skipped earlier. The file upload feature, indicated by this icon here, allows us to insert the raw bytes of a file as input into CyberChef. Now this file that we upload can be anything we want it to be: media, documents, archives, etc. To demonstrate this feature, I have prepared a zip archive for us to use. So let's try uploading it into CyberChef and see what happens. We can see the PK file header in the output window, so we know that our file successfully uploaded into CyberChef. From here, we can perform any operations we want to on the bytes of the file, and save it to a new file should we so choose. Now CyberChef does have several file handling capabilities as well, such as metadata extraction and image rendering, but we won't be covering those in this video, as this is more of a beginner guide on how to use the tool, rather than a deep dive into all the operations it can perform. We might save those for future videos. The folder upload feature, indicated by the folder icon here, allows us to upload a whole folder of files to CyberChef. This will add each file as a separate tab in the input window. For exhibiting this feature, I have a folder prepared with 4 text files inside of it. Opening these files in Notepad, we can see that these are just some plain text flags that maybe we want to create some recipes or CTF challenges for in CyberChef. However, we don't want to upload each file individually, so we can upload the whole bulk of files by just uploading the folder they reside in. Let's try it out. As you can see, all 4 of our files now exist as new tabs that we can click on in the input window. And with that, this concludes our beginner guide to the CyberChef tool. Big thanks and shoutouts to CTF Guide for giving us the chance to work with them to produce amazing content for your consumption. We'll have their website and Discord linked in the description box below this video, so make sure you go and register and join both of those. And you know the drill at this point. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Turn on post notifications to get regular injections of cyber content directly into your feed. Check out our Patreon, join our Discord, and follow us on Twitter. Links in the description box down below. And leave any feedback or questions in the comment section down below. This is Almond Milk. Thanks for watching. Goodbye, world.